Oh, can you believe it? Football is back. The lads are on tour. They're in Bangkok and they are ready to go. So many games going to be coming thick and fast over the next couple of weeks before the start of the Premier League season. And one thing that I love more than anything about pre-season is the fact that we get to see some of the young talent from our academy shine through to knock on that door. That's what it's all about in pre-season, knocking on that door. And there is no one better to speak to about Manchester United's academy products than Mr. Mujak. Tony is with us. How you doing, mate? It's good to see your face.
I'm good. I had a very good break from last season through May and into the early part of June, and then I have to admit I got to early June and I wasn't interested in the tennis or anything else. I suddenly got the usual pre-season boredom things, and I thought, no, I'm ready now. So I've been waiting for stuff to happen for the last couple of weeks. It's one of those things. Summer's always that period where I do all the analysis from the previous season. I get all my stuff up to date. I get all my records online on my spreadsheets, and then I'm like, I'm ready now. I want to go.
Yeah, because if you don't know Tony, obviously Tony follows the first team, of course he does, but he also follows religiously youth levels at United at youth level, including in the youth cup, which is what that's the under 16s, isn't it? And then you've got the under 18s, then you've got obviously the under 23s. So Tony watches every single age bracket, so to speak, or tries to. That's been made tough by the pandemic. We've had this conversation before with what games is shown and who's allowed in and stuff. But Tony likes to keep up to date on all of United's teams and talents coming through, which is why I thought, Tony, going into pre-season, I think there's 4 lads there who potentially maybe United fans need to take note of, and their names I think we know, but it'd be good to build up a little bit more of a fact file on them before we watch them play over the next couple of weeks. I thought we could do that today, and I think naturally we'll come to someone who featured a little bit under Rangnick, came on against Liverpool, and we all loved his little bite and the ferociousness that he had. So let's start with Hannibal, shall we? Hannibal is in the tour squad. He was in and around the squad at the end of last season. What has his progress been like over the last 12 months?
To be frank, I think there's a couple of things going on with Hannibal in terms of development. One, I think everyone can agree that technically he's very good, and clearly from it's now they've gone from the under 23s back now to under 21s, and he's clearly above that kind of level in my opinion. The challenge he's got is that he's actually played for his country more than he's played for United. So I think he's got like 12 or 13 games for Tunisia, and performing really, really well in those games and getting a lot of kudos and influencing those games. So he's not just getting cameos, he's playing some decent stretches of time on the pitch. At United, he's not getting that kind of opportunity. So as you rightly said, Ben, towards the end of last season, he was in the squad quite a lot with 1 or 2 others. He got a cameo here and there without really getting the opportunity of say, playing a whole game. And some of that is maturity. Some of that is he's been away with international. Some of that is he's taken a few knocks as well. And I think there's always been a question mark over his, at least with some people, a question mark over his temperament. He tends to lose his rag a little bit, certainly with under 23 football last season. I'm trying to think of a game he didn't get booked in, because he's got that kind of volatility. And you mentioned bite against Liverpool. I think it's a fine line between bite and volatility, or bite and emotional intelligence. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Ten Hag manages him, and how he integrates him into the first team. Personally, I wouldn't, people talk about going out on loan. He could well get a loan move, and who knows. I kind of would like to see him stay at the club. I'd like to see him have at least half a season under Ten Hag, because Ten Hag just seems to be, much more composed. He's not going to be he's going to be under pressure, but he'll be under different pressures. And I think he will be a great mentor and a great coach for someone like Hannibal. He's got that style where he's obviously intense and stuff, but he's got this calm, composed way of dealing with people. And I think that will go really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing him on tour. He'll definitely get some game time. I don't think that's going to be in too much doubt with the squad we've taken. We've taken 13 youth players out of the 31, plus a lot of other young players as well. So I think we're playing 6 or 7 games in total. So he'll certainly get his chance to impress. And I think technically he can. As we've said, the only big issue is his maturity.
He's 19 now, isn't he? And I think we signed him, didn't we, when we went on that pre-Brexit spree of
Yeah,
signing some of Europe's hottest talents that
yeah, the
summer. I
season
think
before Brexit. Yeah,
yeah, I think he was like, and then he was 16, 17 at that point. But, you know, it was reported at the time. I remember seeing the reports around 8 million euros or something, 5 million euros to sign him. We did put a lot of hope in him being that next wonder kid, didn't we? And we brought him into the ranks very early and let him go through, so to speak, the youth league and United at academy level as well when he first came in. Is there a little bit of pressure on him though to potentially be that boy wonder, to be that wonder kid, to be breaking through the squad at 19? Because as we know, if you break through at 21, 22, you've got to make an instant impact when you're that age. You've got to have it, because if you don't, you're then creeping into 22, 23, and you're potentially too old at that point to be that boy wonder.
yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure. I don't know whether he feels the pressure. I don't feel, off the pitch. When I see him off the pitch, he doesn't look. You can see certain people are kind of be a little bit stressed. He doesn't feel that way. But looking at what he does, as I said, I've watched a few of his games for Tunisia, and he doesn't seem under pressure. Now I know international football is a different game. It's a slower game than perhaps the Premier League. He's trying to impress Rangnick last season by getting stuck into Liverpool when we weren't playing very well. He wanted to cement a place in the team, as you'd expect a young player. But it's how he goes about it. And I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter where people say, "Oh, he's showing passion." Yeah, maybe, but there's a difference between passion and recklessness. And if he manages that, then Ten Hag will integrate him. If he doesn't manage that, then I think he becomes a liability. So I think this season will be really interesting, the first 6 months, to see has he you mentioned 19, has he grown up? Because you probably know other 19-year-olds, they're very mature.
Mm-hmm.
They can take what gets dished out on the pitch, and they don't get too upset by it. They kind of goes in their throat. To be fair, Greenwood was one of them. He kind of got kicked all over the pitch when he got in, and he kind of took it in his stride. Rashford took it in stride when he came in, and they've got good temperaments at a very young age. And I think that we talk about physicality, and perhaps we'll talk about one or two other players with physicality as well. But for Hannibal, I think it's temperament. I think he's got it. I just think he needs a little bit of mentoring.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about growth spurts sometimes around this age, but he's already like nearing 6 foot, isn't he? From what I saw online, and he's quite slender. Don't get me wrong, but he's got that low center of gravity about him as well, hasn't he? Which is tall, but it's still very quick with his feet.
A lovely balance.
It'd be interesting to see how he grows out as a player, and also positionally. Where does he fit in? Where do you think his best position is, Tony?
When he's been playing with the under-23s, he's almost like he's playing in that 10 or 8 kind of role, but he's got this freedom to move. So you'll see him move left, move right. And what he loves to do, and it's similar to Shoretire, he likes to take people on, and he likes to run at teams. Shoretire tends to stay a little bit further forward. Mejbri will come deeper to get the ball and then run at people again. And I don't know how many games you've seen, Ben, but later in the game when other teams tire, that's kind of when he gets a real impact. So I'm wondering whether, integrating him into the team, whether he'll start to get cameos in those last, 10, 20, 30 minutes.
Especially with 5 subs now.
Yeah, exactly. So when teams start to tire, he could be a really good impact player coming in and running at people. Not wide in a way that, Martial or Rashford or somebody, but picking up the ball deep and running at them, because, players can do that. If you think back to our first team last year, Matic couldn't do it because he wasn't quick enough, and he was too old. Mata was too slow. But we need someone. McTominay, it's not his game. You really need someone to run at defenses, and I think he could be the one. There's one or two others that can do the same thing, but I like him. I like him a lot. I think his natural talent is fairly clear for everyone to see, and as a consequence, it's just about managing temperament.
Yeah. I mean, I hate saying it, Tony, because I hate having and making these, so to speak, comparisons. But we're looking at Frankie de Jong now and what he does when he picks the ball up off the defenders and progresses play. In some ways, maybe just slightly further up at the pitch, not straight from the centre backs, but in that midfield area. If he's getting the ball off of someone, that is Hannibal for me. But he has that low. From what I've seen of him, he's got that low centre of gravity, a bit Hazard-esque in some ways. His balance is brilliant and wins a lot of free kicks. And I don't know, is that where his anger comes from? He's always being booted. If he's not being clipped, he's not playing well, is he?
Well, I think some of that he brings. I think some of that is true. I also think some of it he brings on himself. So because he reacts, and the next thing he reacts is, and if I'm a centre half or a defender, and I'm seeing someone react, I'm going to play that. I'm going to I'm going to be watching that and thinking, how can I wind this kid up? And I think Liverpool did that, which is why he got booked. They saw this young kid and they thought he's got caught up in the emotion of it all. I mean, you won't be old enough to remember it all, Ben, but I remember when Norman Whiteside made his debut, or Nicky Button played players like this, ice cold. I mean, they didn't let the occasion get to them. They were just in control. And I think it's that control piece, which is a maturity thing. It's definitely a maturity and emotional thing. And if he can manage that, and we're talking about growth spurts, I think everybody develops at different levels. Some people, it takes them a while to get tactically astute. And some players, you think they haven't quite got and then all of a sudden it clicks. Some players, it's a physical thing, and I think with Hannibal, it's an emotional thing.
I think it would be. We've got the 5 subs. I'd love to have him in the squad next season. He's got it. He's gifted. You said it earlier on. He's got it. He's gifted. He's got the natural talent. Obviously, he needs to mature. It can't be easy though for a kid like Hannibal to mature because of the way that the under-21, the under-23 setup is now. Obviously, back in the day, you'd have some first team players potentially in and around it, and they're the ones you're feeding off of. And I know they all train together sometimes, and especially with the COVID bubbles, they would have. But that's very different to a match day. And when you're with a squad on a match day and the mature players and looking at inspirations and people to idolize off of, I think maybe if we can keep him in and around the squad, he can feed. Let's take Bruno Fernandez, for example. We know how petulant he can be, but he's not like it 90 minutes of the game. No, there's a maturity about his petulance 90% of the time. So, he just needs to have those right people to look at and find how to channel that better and to have that growing. But for me, he's got to be around mature people to be able to feed off that and get that and not with, I suppose, the kids, the youth side, because otherwise they'll never grow up because they'll always be in that youth bubble. Sorry for punching my, in that youth bubble. So pre-season might be a really good chance for the squad to come together and for these young lads to maybe grow in maturity, grow in stature, grow in their presence, footballing IQ, but and also, improving on the pitch too. So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm really excited to see Hannibal for a little bit longer on this tour. And I really do think that if he can kick on this preseason, as you say, I think Ten Hag will like him. I think he can be in that squad next year and he can play a big part in that squad. If he can play 25 games next season, whether that's coming off the bench or starting, including Cup and Europa League, that's a win. That's a massive win for Hannibal. Let's move on then to another player who's got it. Zidane Iqbal. A lot has been said about this kid by name, but also by nature too. What do you make of him, Tony?
Technically, again, very similar to Hannibal in terms of technical gifts. I think his passing is really good. I think he's got a better eye for goal than Hannibal. That's for sure. If you look at last year's reserves or under 23s, whatever we call them, he scored quite a few goals, important goals in games. So I think he has got more of not so much an attacking flair, but I think he's also got a way of bringing other people into play. He doesn't run at people like a Mejbri will be, but he'll bring other people into play in a different way. Again, he, from a technical perspective, very good. We were talking about those three things. Emotionally mature, technically mature, and tactically mature. I think sometimes tactically he gets caught out, and that's because of the nature of the role he plays, where he will make a decision to push on, which sometimes leaves gaps behind, so he's chasing back. But he's still young. He's still emerging into that kind of role. And as you alluded to, you're not going to get that kind of experience playing against other 19-year-olds in the under-21 league. We need to push him into the first team. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but there's obviously been some talk on social media that says that Ten Hag has been very impressed with him over and above many others. So, which is obviously why he's been included in the squad. If that's the case, then clearly there's something in his play, at least in training, that the manager is keen to see in a full-blooded, a game against proper opposition, as opposed to your your teammates on the other side of the pitch. So he needs to push on. He could be one that I think comes back from the tour and may go out on loan. So I think for him, what happens in the next 6 or 7 games will probably determine what happens this season for him. But yeah, he's probably, and then with somebody like that, a player like that, because he's not really a 6, he's probably a 10 or an 8 as well. If you use that kind of language, he probably needs to go out on loan, but with the right team. So finding the right team is going to be really difficult because you want him to go against in a bunch of people where he's going to get game time and also express himself. So you don't want to put him to a defensive side where he's not going to get the chance to excel. They're going to, because he takes risks on the ball. And when you're taking risks on the ball in a way that Fernandez does, some of those passes aren't going to come off. And in professional football, if you do that too often, you'll get dropped pretty quickly. So I think that a loan may come for him if, depending on what happens in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, at a good level as well, I think is really important for him. Because let's face it, what do you make as well? He's another player, Tony, who obviously has had a couple of caps at international level. How good is that for the young lads to be playing already in international football?
Well, I think what's really interesting is, and this isn't new. I mean, if you go back in history, there's loads and loads of United youngsters who have played international football before even playing first team for United, and that's been the 60s and the 70s and so on. And so that's not an abnormal thing to see happen because of the type of players we have. But what I do think is that I think that's great for the players we're talking about, because now they're getting adult experiences in terms of games where there's a what's the right word? There's a vested interest in the outcome, and because there's a vested interest in the outcome, that's additional pressure you have to manage. It's not like a friendly. And so if it's not friendly, there's vested interest like a World Cup qualifier or a Euro or something, then that means that those players are taking on that responsibility and managing that responsibility, which can only be good when they come back, particularly if they're not getting games at United.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also it puts them out there on the market as well in a good way, because they're not just bringing in, a United under 21, a United under 23 player, or a youth player from Manchester United. They're also bringing in an international.
That's
I
right.
mean, and it does wonders from that point of view if you're a manager looking to sign someone who can play a good level of football. Another 19-year-old Tony, Charlie Savage, of course, son to Robbie. He just keeps on impressing, doesn't he? I mean, he goes about his game. And he does it. What he does, I think he does very good, doesn't he? I read something online earlier that maybe Ten Hag sees him as an option at 6 next season, if we're looking for a bit of depth.
Potentially, I think Charlie's problem is he's got James Garner in front of him, and Jimmy Garner had an absolutely cracking season last season with Nottingham Forest, as most people will know, and helped them get promoted into the Premier League. So there was an awful lot of thinking in the circles I knock around with, where they're saying that, the role that Matic played, I don't know if everybody remembers Matic, kind of half a dozen times, at least, maybe even more than that, maybe a dozen times, he would come off the bench with 15, 20 minutes to go, and he would play that holding role in a defensive play and just control that midfield. And people were saying, why can't James Garner do that role? And it's a good question, because I think he can. So I think if Jimmy Garner gets the chance, and this is going to be really interesting because they both play very similar roles. Jimmy Garner's the more attacking of the two. He'll have a goal in him, whereas Charlie Savage hasn't got a great goal scoring record. He tends to sit, as you said, as a 6. Having said that, out of all the players we've mentioned so far, he's the one that I've seen this steady progress. Every single time you watch him play and you watch him play and watch him play, and then you kind of reflect back and you think, he's actually improved this month. He's got better. And he's done that all through last season. He's consistently, not massively, but he's just got better and better at what he does. And then what happens is when you've got consistency, then you get reliable. And when you're reliable, your manager starts trusting you. And I think that's an interesting thing for Charlie is that, he's clearly got the manager's trust, which is why he's on the tour. And it'll be, again, interesting to see how he progresses. But I think his challenge will be Jimmy Garner. And I don't see both of them being able to play. And you can throw another one into the hat, which is Ethan Galbraith. So those 3 players all pretty much play the same role. And I would, if I was a betting person, which I'm not really, I would probably say one of those three is going to have to be sold. As we know, Dylan Levitt was sold this week. I think one of those three will be sold. I think that'll be Ethan Galbraith, given the fact that he's not been taken on tour. I think one of the other two, Savage or Garner, will go back on loan somewhere, because I don't think we need two of them with Scott McTominay. And if someone, a De Jong or someone else comes into play as well, or an Ericsson, you've only got so many midfield places alongside, Fred and Fernandez and who else have we got in that? Diallo,
Van der Beek.
Van der Beek. Theoretically, Lestri's done really well. So not all of them are going to be hanging around. Some of them are going to get loan spells, and so you're really questioning who's that going to be. And my gut instinct will be Charlie's probably a year off that, because I think there's others ahead of him who are better.
We spoke earlier on about maturity, and I think that's something that maybe Charlie Savage does have in abundance, and sometimes that can also translate to intelligence as well. The way that you pick up instructions, the way you learn your game, and what you go away and do to improve yourself as well. And I think having Robbie as his dad is a great influence on that, because Robbie, he jokes about his career. He ended up at some good clubs, and he had a long career, did Robbie Savage. So Charlie can learn off of that. He can learn off the mistakes, but he can also learn off the good things as well that his dad did, but become his own man, his own player. And I'm pretty sure that's what every dad says to their boy or girl. You become your own person. You do you. And I think Charlie's really evolving into that and really taking his name and becoming his own entity. And I like that. And I think that's why, actually, I'll say, Tony, I agree with you. I think Charlie Savage on loan is a great shout, because he's learning what he's learning, and he's only ever going to learn so much at reserve team level and academy level. He's now got to go and play in the Championship. Probably. He's now got to go and grow playing games week in, week out. And then we'll really see him, won't we? Like we have James Garner, go up those levels.
No, I think you're right. And I tend to agree. It could well be that, Charlie steps up again. The great thing about kids when you watch them is you never know when they're going to plateau, and you never know if that plateau is the final plateau or whether it's just a stepping stone to a new plateau. This is just the great thing about watching kids develop. So he's continually made little incremental steps to be where he is. But who's not to say that he doesn't push on even more? And as you quite rightly said, with that discipline, that consistency, the fact that he can take and implement instructions clearly, he's talking about his temperament. Got a great temperament. Out of all the players we've mentioned, he's the one who doesn't get flustered. The other thing is he's left-footed as well, so he's got that additional string to his bow that he can. He's two-footed. That maybe some of the others aren't. So you just don't know. But my guess would be it'll be between him and Jimmy Garner, to see who gets that regular number, whatever Ten Hag decides to do with his formation. That one of them two will be involved regularly at some point, I'm guessing. If both of them go on loan, then I kind of think something else is going on.
Well, it hinges on the midfield options, right? Hopefully we do bring in a midfielder of quality, because we need it. But I'd still go as far as to say that if you're Charlie Savage or you're James Garner, take all the education you can right now, but you go out there every day in training and you prove a point, because ultimately there's a space in that team. There's a space in that squad, even, because our midfield options aren't of the class or the quality of United of past, and of United of quality to win titles, to win trophies. So there is a real opportunity there that if you're a young lad, you've got that drive, but you've also got the quality and the talent, which you're at Manchester United. Clearly you do. And do you know what I mean? It's your chance to grab it.
I think you're right, Ben. The biggest challenge I have with our midfield at the moment is they don't score goals. So Zidane Iqbal is not a prolific goal scorer. Mejbri is not a prolific goal scorer. Garner was never a prolific goal scorer. Savage is not a prolific goal scorer. If you're going to make it in the United midfield as a young player, you've got to bring something into play apart from being a good midfielder. So when Nicky Butt came into the team, he scored a lot of goals. People forget that. he contributed. I think in his first Premier League season, he contributed 8 goals or something. You know, that's a lot of goals. You know, Scott McTominay didn't do that last season. I think he did the year before. But, you know, unless you're scoring goals from midfield, you know, Fred, McTominay, the lads I've just mentioned, you're now putting a huge pressure on your forward line if you're not getting goals from midfield. You know, we were used to having Giggs on one side chipping in with 15 a season or 10 a season, Beckham on the other side doing the same thing, but in the middle scoring goals, Scholes scoring goals. So all of a sudden you've got it's a different conversation, absolutely, because not only are they doing defensive things well in the way that Nicky Butt would do, or you know, skillful things in the way Giggs and Beckham, but they were scoring goals. I'm not seeing that. And I haven't seen it through all their careers. They're not prolific goal scorers.
It's also about the partnerships, though, isn't it? It's that if you're not going to do that, then you need to make sure that you're allowing your partner to do that. And I think that's really, really important that, you know, if you bring someone in like Charlie Savage or James Garner, the person who plays next to them complements them as much as they complement that person next to them. And I think that's why, obviously, there's a lot of frustration at the moment with United not having done their business, United going on tour with players that clearly need to be sold or pushed out on loan. Get it? You can only have certain amount of numbers in squads, but obviously this is harming our process and progress that could be made over the next. We've got 2 weeks. 2 weeks till the season starts, more or less. Like we need to be pushing on, and we need to start forming those partnerships in unity. And I think, again, great chance for the young lads, because all you've got to do is find a route in, combine well, impress the manager, and potentially you've got an opportunity to be there day one of the season if everything's still up in the air. So now's the chance for these lads. And I think that's what's really exciting. And that leads me on perfectly to the player who I think most United fans out there at the moment are most excited about, because he had a superb season last year. He's obviously also been playing international football over the summer as well. Garnacho. I mean, look, we all go through hot and cold spells with young talents, hoping that they are going to be the next Ronaldo, the next Messi, and the next big player. You've watched United for years, Tony, and you've seen academy graduates come and go who we've had high expectations for and quite low expectations for as well, still go on to have great careers. Where does he rank at the moment for you? Because a lot's being said about Garnacho.
He's for me, he's still a little bit of an enigma, not in terms of his quality, but you know, he at the beginning of the season, I remember a report or a video that was on YouTube. I can't remember what it was, and it was the under-17 Premier League Cup at Wigan, and Garnacho played in that game on St Christopher's Field, I think it is, over in Wigan, which is in the middle of blinking nowhere, right? So, you know, he's in the middle of nowhere with no one around him on a blustery, cold, you know, autumn's day, and he scored a couple of goals. And I remember seeing whoever was there at the time, whatever fan was there taping this, and they put it on YouTube. And I thought to myself, they're very good goals. He scored 2 really, really good goals there. So, you know, your brain just says, keep an eye on him, because what happened at the time, everyone was talking about Gerardo and Fernandez, you know, and all these other Spanish lads that come in, and he was kind of under the radar because he hadn't quite got into the under 18s. Gerardo was in there first, and then Fernandez first, and then Gerardo. So, and Puigmal was still around as well, so he was getting a little bit of noise. And you're watching Garnacho, and I'm just thinking, you know, he's got some, and he's left-footed. The whole left thing's really important. And then he got into the 18s, and he scored a couple of goals, and they were very similar goals. He likes to cut in and bend it around, which is really interesting. And then he scored 2 crackers in the Youth Cup early in the campaign against, I think it was against Scunthorpe or somebody, not Everton. I think it was Scunthorpe. And that was at Old Trafford, and everyone was going, wow. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, hang on, this kid can play. So then he's in your consciousness, and you're now watching to see what else he can do. And I think you talk about temperament. I think he loved the publicity. I think he loved the attention. And then all of a sudden his confidence grew from that. And I think this is a classic example of a young player who's just, you know, not struggling in any shape or form, but just concentrating on his game, getting stuck in, doing whatever he's been told to do. And then all of a sudden he gets this consciousness of, do you know what? I'm finding this pretty easy, and I'm doing this all the time, and it's working, and I'm getting better. and then all of a sudden, because confidence is massive, and the other thing that happened with him, he stayed injury free, so he didn't get a lot of knocks, and that makes a huge difference as well, particularly for a forward, Ben, because defenders are going to watch them on tape and go, we need to stop this kid. So towards the latter part of the season, he was getting kicked a bit, and he was getting knocks and pushed over the line, and he kept bouncing back. And I think most people remember in a couple of games he scored a few late goals in the Youth Cup run when a lot of teams were tired. One where he almost ran the length of the pitch and scored a cracking goal. So
we've seen a left winger do that for Manchester United before.
Exactly. A few of them actually. But
I don't know. Was he Argentine? I can't remember. No, he might have been Welsh.
But he's really exciting because he's what we might say is an old school type of winger. He's not really a midfielder in that respect. He's an old school winger, and we love wingers at United. So he's exciting. He's impressive. He does the basics well. He's got great feet. He's got pace. So if you're kind of ticking all the things, he's doing all the things well, and he's got the right temperament. He's not fazed by getting kicked by anybody. We've talked about responding to the physicality. And as a left winger, you don't quite need the same physicality that you need from a centre forward or from a midfielder. You can get away with it a bit. You can skin people and run around them, kind of thing, which is what he was doing a lot of the time. And his reading of the game's pretty good as well. His anticipation's pretty good. So when to go and when not to go, he's really good at managing that. So I think he was the surprise packet of last season. And it was recognised when Rangnick, pulled him into the first team. He was on the bench for the last half a dozen games or so of the season. He got a run out, which was great to see, which would be great for his confidence. And clearly that's continued with Ten Hag. We've seen him in the squad, and he's obviously seen him in training thinking this kid's got something too. Because he's only 18, he's just turned 18, and he hasn't got that much experience really. It's really weird, Ben. When you win the FA Youth Cup at United, it creates careers. Your career, you ask anybody, your career is almost set when you win the FA Youth Cup. Everybody looks at things in a different way. People outside the club look at these players in a different way. Inside the club, you're looked at in a different way. It launches careers. And I think he used that platform, him and one or two others used that platform to really impress the coaching staff and maybe surprise a few people as well. And I'm looking forward to see him develop. The challenge he's going to have is when he runs into a poor run of form and he gets dropped back to the 21s, how he manages that. And that's all that, there's other players who don't manage that so well because ego is too strong a word, but they get used to being around the first team and then they drop back and they're kind of unhappy about that and they're frustrated with that. Well, that's life and you need to crack on. So be interesting to see what happens there, but great talent.
It makes careers. I was going to say it makes careers as well, because I think we as a club and fans also appreciate what comes with winning that FA Youth Cup too. And that is immense talent. You don't win that trophy if you don't have incredible depth when it comes to talent within your younger ranks, and that you're managing them well, coaching them well, and building them well as a team. And I think that's the most important thing there. You could have a squad of individuals challenging for that cup, and there's a lot of teams out there that do, and you can see that when you watch them play. But the biggest part, and we keep mentioning this word on this show, is maturity. And if you've got a certain level of maturity in your squad, you build a team. And I think ultimately the best team always wins that trophy. And I think that is then evident when you watch the individual players play and their performances, like Fernandez, for example. We can carry on listing. There's a number of names in that academy side that's superb, but they can fit into any United side at any level because they know how to play as a team and they've got a good amount of maturity already up there. And I think Garnacho, as you say, is one of them, which was going to bring me on, Tony. We mentioned about
for a second, Ben, just finishing that piece off. I think you're right. I think the FA Cup winning team was a great team. There were some individuals, but it was a real team effort. And you saw that with some of the other clubs that came out. Leicester had a couple of really strong players, but that's all they had. Wolves had a winger who was very impressive, but when he wasn't performing, they kind of lost their edge, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're right about team, and Garnacho is a very good team player. What I would say is there is a lot of hype. It's very common now we hype people. And I've seen a lot of players just as good as him and better than him come through the system. The Kieran Richardsons, the Danny Welbecks, the Marcus Rashfords. There's been a lot of kids who have come through and have been equally good and not quite pushed on to what we might have expected in terms of that real elite level.
I'll name one. I'll name one straight off the bat, and I'll forever be devastated. James Wilson. Just can't.
I mean, James was another one who had. I mean, don't get me wrong. James had a terrible injury, which affected his confidence and affected the way he played. But he also went to that. What I was saying earlier. He got overly confident, if that makes sense. So that when he took the step down, he kind of lost interest. He didn't want to play reserve football. Well, the coaching staff are watching that. And if the attitude and the temperament, when you go down a spell, I remember Gary Neville playing at Blackburn Rovers at Altrincham years and years ago, and he put some kid in the stand, and the kids and the coach said, "What? He's 19 years old. What?" And Gary Neville, "I don't bloody care." He says, "Someone's got my place in the first team. My manager's in the stand watching me. He's not going to watch me be nice to your 19-year-old." I said, "I've got to look after me and my job, and I've got to get my place in the first team. I'm putting in 100%, and if your 19 can't hold it, then he shouldn't be in the reserves." And this is Gary Neville arguing with the Blackburn manager at the time. And we were sitting each other going, and then you just got to love Gary Neville, right? But that was the difference in philosophy between him and a James Wilson. And then you wonder why James hasn't quite pushed on. Some of that's injury, some of it's probably temperament, some a bit of luck, there's a whole bunch of reasons.
But he had the world at his feet, though, didn't he? In some way, he was that good. He was that good. He
was that, and I was more impressed with James Wilson than Alexandro Garnacho.
Yes, I think for my generation, like when I was watching James Wilson come through, I would have been that 15, 16-year-old United fan, like paying attention to some of the young players. For me, James Wilson was just.
He was
probably
class.
one of the best that I've seen at that level. He was that good at that level, and we see some of the ones that have come through, namely Rashford in the squad now, etc. James Wilson was better. He was better at that level.
I agree, and that's just why I think we've got to be very careful with the hype.
Yeah.
That I don't think Garnacho was in James Wilson's level, and he's certainly not in Ravel Morrison's level. He's a number of categories down. However, let's not pretend he's not a good player, and let's not pretend he's got great potential. And I think that's the interesting thing for him is, does he continue to show his potential?
We talk about temperament just quickly there, Tony. When it comes to players like Garnacho, and you've already said there about coping with the pressure quite well. So do we need to take baby steps with players like Garnacho? If he's ready and if he's got the talent, shouldn't we be looking to keep him around the squad instead of shifting him out on loan? What would you do with him?
I wouldn't send him out on loan.
You'd be keeping him in and around the club at least.
I think he's too young to go on loan. At that, I mean, the answer is it depends. You've got some very immature 17-year-olds and you've got some very mature 17-year-olds. The last thing I'd want to do is send a 17 or 8 where he's just turned 18 in whenever it was July. I would not want to send him on loan to a club where the club suddenly changes their manager and there's turmoil and he's left on his own in the middle of nowhere, with no one speaking Spanish, and you're thinking to yourself, we've left him out on a limb here. Now, United are pretty good at this stuff. I'm not criticizing the club in any shape or form. They're pretty good at not letting that happen, but it can happen. And I'm just, and this is a personal thing. It's not based on anything I know. I just think another year in and around, because you got to remember he hasn't played under 23 football.
Yeah,
he's gone from last season playing in the under 17s and under 18s to the first team. He's basically missed a whole level, if that makes sense, Ben. So we don't know what he can do at that level. He's missed a whole. Normally what would happen is that group. So they've just been up to Scotland playing in playing a couple of games on over the weekend. The under 21s and the under 18s. He would have been in the under 21 squad playing with those other under 21s and performing on that stage. Instead, he's with the first team. So he's kind of missed a whole level. So we just want to be really careful that the club knows what they're doing. But I don't think he will go on loan. I think they'll keep him close.
Well, let's talk about another young lad as part of that youth winning team, and also someone who keeps being mentioned in the comments a lot when it comes to the preseason squad. He didn't make it, and that is Charlie Mcneill. We've spoken about him quite a bit whenever we've spoken about you and Connor, Tony and Benny, about him and why potentially might not just be ready yet. But the truth is, like you've just said there about Garnacho, he's not. He's played one game, isn't he, for the under-21s? He hasn't even gone up through the ranks yet.
So Charlie Mcneill, I watched him last season. The game that really stood out was at Lee Sports Village. I think it must have been October, November. I've got it in my notes. And he was up against Brighton and Hove Albion, who had 3 first-team players playing a back three. And they were beasts. And he looked like a baby next to them. And it was that moment in time. And he would have learnt a lot from that. He was pushing them and running up against them, but he didn't get a kick all game. And that's what, we were talking about physicality. You don't need the physicality out wide. You do need it up front. And as a consequence, or you need something else, which is electric pace. Now he's quick, but he's quick over 10 yards. He's not quick like a Rashford quick or a Greenwood quick. So he hasn't got the electric pace to outrun a defender. And he hasn't got the physicality to hold onto a ball. So when he's playing on the halfway line, or he's playing halfway between the half line and goal, he's not able to influence the game at this moment in time to any level that's going to make a difference. In the 6-yard box or in the 18-yard box, that's suddenly a different kettle of fish, because now all of a sudden you only need 2 yards and you've got an opportunity, and he's a deadly finisher and he's great in front of goal. But not every centre forward plays in an 18-yard box every game, if that makes sense. He hasn't developed that part of his game. And I think that's linked to his physicality, and he's still relatively thin. Now, I don't know if you've seen any pictures of some of the lads, Elanga's training regime. I don't know if you've seen it on TV. He looks, I don't know if you've seen it. He is just filled out in a way muscularly. Well, unfortunately, as you know, certain lads have got a physique that allows that to happen. Rashford had it. Greenwood was getting there. He hadn't quite developed it. He was more skinnier. But Rashford certainly has got that physicality. Even Jesse Lingard, who was very, very thin, he started to develop the muscular. Charlie's not got that. He hasn't got, it takes a while to fill out when you're his type of player or his physique. And until that happens, I think he's going to fail to impress as a number 9. But then I keep asking the same question. Show me an 18-year-old in the Premier League who's playing centre forward for their club, knocking in 20 goals a season. Name somebody.
Yeah.
Unless you're Wayne Rooney and the size and physique that Wayne Rooney was, unless you're Wayne Rooney, it's not happening. They're all strikers develop a lot later. Yeah.
And I was going to say, by the way, we spoke about growth spurts earlier on. Again, he may still go through one, which is why you don't want to chuck him through at the deep end, because he may be a different player in 12 months' time to what he is right now, just because his body's changing.
And Joe Hugel's another one. He's so thin, tall and thin. These lads, because their genetics is different from other people's, they're not going to have the muscles that some of these other lads have until they're 21, 22. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be careful. I mean, the club is all over this. They're very careful not to get them in the gym and overdevelop them, because that will just force muscles where there doesn't need to be the forcing. They just have to let it happen. We've got great fitness coaches. They know exactly what's going on. They will slowly develop the muscle and the technique and the capability as they get older and mature.
They've probably the last 2 years as well been studying as well. So they the last thing they want to do is chuck these boys into the gym and try and work on their bodies. It's like, no, you focus on football and you focus on studying. And once we've got the studying out the way, we'll then focus on other areas. So now that they're moving up through the ranks, it's going to get a bit tougher. It's going to get a bit more physical. Now's the time for players that you mentioned there, especially Mcneil, to start, to start evolving into a man. And I think ultimately that's what's going to happen.
Well, I think that's right, Ben. And there's a lot of internet talk about, well, he's ready because he scored a hat trick. He scored
24 goals in 21 games. It's Haaland.
All that sort of stuff. He's ready. He scored loads of goals in the Youth Cup last season, and everyone's going, he's ready. I go, whoa. He's playing against other 18-year-old kids, right? He's playing against people his own age, which means they're his own size. Mm-hmm. The minute you go into a Premier League game, they're not your size anymore. They're double your size. Mm-hmm. And if you're coming up against what I would call non-British type of players, they've got every trick under the book, if you know what I'm talking about. Well, he's not come across any of that before. So when you've got, I'm making this up, but when you've got a big hairy-assed Italian, that we're playing in Europe, who's pulling every trick that they've learned all through their career, Charlie's never seen it, never heard of it, doesn't know what it's like. So how's he going to cope with that? A Marcus Rocco type of character. How's he going to cope with that? He's going to get kicked pillar to post. Maybe that's what he needs. Maybe he needs to get, a little bit of kicked pillar to post in the nicest way, not to toughen him up, because I think he's a tough lad. I don't think he's what's the right word? I don't think he's reluctant to get stuck in. Not at all. I think he's willing to. But when you're trying to kick someone's leg and their leg is bigger than your body, you're only going to have so much impact. So he's got to be a little bit. I think he needs to be patient, which I think he is. I'm sure that he gets told this. He needs to be patient when he sees his peers, move quicker than him. As Scott McTominay did when everyone was moving a lot quicker than him when he was a young boy because of his physique. And I think also he just, which, as I say, I'm sure he just needs to be a little bit more patient. And I think the right loan move will help him when the time comes right. He's got to see. He played under 21s last year. He's probably got another season of under 21s to go through. The big challenge, Ben, is we've got so many young players.
I was just about to say, well, one who's going out on loan, who obviously last year won the Jimmy Murphy Award, at a very young age, become United's youngest ever player to play in Europe. We're expecting to have even more of an impact last season, but it was Elanga who potentially got in front of him. But I think that was more because of physique than anything else. Is Shoretiri, who we've spoken about in heaps, especially when he came through last year, kind of, excuse the terminology, but 2 seasons ago. It looks like he's been left back because a loan move may be close. Of course, he's still quite young, but maybe in terms of his footballing brain, a bit more developed. So
yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. I think the position he plays means it's less physical. In terms of he runs at people rather than he's back to goal like Charlie would be. I think he played against Hearts under 21s on the weekend. I think he played half a game, scored a goal late in the period. He's ready. I think he's ready for a loan move. Yeah, we just need to see. The jury's still out on Scholler. Clearly he's got it, but we're not seeing enough of it. So there's a reason for that. He just needs to play games.
Yeah, 100%. And what about and of course we don't have that luxury to put him up against first team players in the reserves because that don't happen anymore really. So he has to go out on loan and experience Championship. And I hope it is Championship. You don't send him too far down that footballing pyramid. He needs to go out there and be given a chance somewhere. But game time, the most important part of it. What at Derby? Go on, go League One, Derby. There we go. They need a couple of footballers. Get him in there. Last one, another apparent line. Someone who a lot of people have been talking about. Left back Alvaro Fernandez. Clearly, with Malacia coming in, we've then got we're packed out in the first team squad. Do you think a loan's a good opportunity for him?
Yeah, I like Fernandez. He's going forward. He's got everything you want a footballer to have: technique, bright, great on the ball, sets up goals. There's been some discussion on some forums that he lacks defensive pace. Depends how you set up, whether that's critical or not. Clearly, you don't want someone slow, but when we say he lacks pace, we're not saying he's slow, but in comparison. But to be perfectly frank, we've been playing Luke Shaw, who doesn't want to get back either. So, so he's a better option moving forward. I still think that there's been a lot of discussion about our left backs. We've got Alex Telles, we've got Luke Shaw, we've now got Tyrell Malacia, we've got Brandon Williams, we've got Alvaro Fernandez. There's 5, and you think to yourself, they're not all going to be able to. We're not going to be able to do stuff for them. You'd expect, someone like Brandon Williams. Is he going to go? Is he going to stay? I think a decision needs to be made with Brandon. Maybe another year on loan, but I think that's just going to delay the inevitable. So what's going to happen there? I think I'm not a huge Alex Telles fan. I don't see what he brings to play. It's just a personal opinion. I'm not a huge Telles fan. I think Luke Shaw needs the competition. I think maybe Malacia will do that. And maybe Fernandez, 6 months, see what happens. But I agree with you. I think they'll send him out on loan.
I think
again, he needs the right club. He needs the right club.
It'd be a good loan for him as well, because again, you go off on loan for a season. You're still young. If you can do really well, we'll probably be Tellez and Williams-less by next season. So then you've just got Shaw and Malacia in front of you. I mean, I honestly think Malacia is coming in as first choice straight away. I genuinely believe that, because just from what I've heard, what I've seen, I think he is the perfect fullback in a Ten Hag system. And I just don't think Luke Shaw is. So then you've got the opportunity, if you're impressing enough, well, you know, is Luke Shaw going to take a whole season on the bench and not much confidence in starting next year as well? I mean, I'm not 100% sure. So there you go. Knock on the door. We've said this a lot on this show, haven't we? So keep knocking on the door. Here's your opportunity. New manager, new start. You're at United. You've got the talent. Keep knocking on the door and you'll make your way in at some point. Let's do one final question then, Tony. Zidane Iqbal, Hannibal. We've also got Garnacho in there as well, and Charlie Savage. Out the four, who are you most looking forward to seeing on this tour?
Hannibal Mejbri.
Hannibal.
I think that if he can step up, he can. First of all, we're not sure what sort of style of play Ten Hag's going to play in the British Premier League. We're not sure. So I think that question about who's going to make it will depend on who can adapt to his style the best. And I think let's give it 6 months and see what happens. And we're probably in a better position to have this dialogue. But I think out of all of them, I think Hannibal Mejbri is ready. And if he can adapt to Ten Hag's style of play, he's the one I think can influence games. And he's the one that, as backup to someone like Fernandez, can be really exciting to watch. He would be my pick.
I agree. And again, just a little side note to add to that, Christian Ericsson coming in, there's an awful lot a Hannibal Mejbri can learn from a player like Christian Ericsson. And I always said the positive about having Juan Mata in your squad is for a young 10 or a young 8. Look at that. Look at Juan Mata. Watch him do what he can do, because he is technically superb, and you need to be technically superb nowadays. Well, I'll take you up on that invite, Tony, to re-catch up about this in 6 months' time. But I'm sure we'll catch up soon then anyway. Before then anyway. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Mujak, go and follow Tony, please. Everything you need to know this season when it comes to Manchester United Academy, under-21s, youth team, follow him. He'll give you the updates every single day, all the time, whenever anything comes through, he is on it. So please go and follow Tony. Make sure you like and subscribe. Loads more content coming up from the pre-season tour and the fallout of the games as well. There we go. Who are you most looking forward to see on the tour? We've spoken about the academy players. Is it a good opportunity for them? Who do you think would best suit a Ten Hag system? Get in the comments, like the video, share it far and wide. This is the information that fans need to know, right? Heading into this pre-season tour. So share it and make sure you hit subscribe. As I said, loads coming up from us. For now, we'll say goodbye. Take it easy, guys. Thank you very much.